It's time we have an adult conversation about love. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. I'm excited today to talk to you about a film that I think you should all know about because it's incredibly original, unique. It's difficult to draw comparisons to other types of independent films. It tackles really tough territory in a really unique and original way. I'm excited to talk to the filmmaker, Esmé von Hoffman. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. Good to see you.
Great to see you too. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to talk about this film because I see a lot of independent films here at Film Threat, and I've never seen anything I don't have any other indie films I can even compare it to. And just to set it up for you, Ovid and the Art of Love is about, and did I even say Ovid right? Is it Ovid? Is it?
We say Ovid, but it's Roman, so who knows how it was actually pronounced. Some people say.
That's true. Ovid. But Ovid, what I love is the way that you get into the film first. First, it's from the point of view of a young boy, a student, who's reading about Ovid. And then it manifests perhaps out of his brain, if I'm interpreting it correctly. Who knows? There are multiple correct interpretations, I'm sure. And then you see his interpretation of the story playing out. And it's a story during Ovid was a poet in Roman times, I believe the era of Augustus, if I'm correct.
Absolutely.
And wrote about love in a way that challenged the status quo at the time. And what's amazing is the story plays out in the boy's head, but it's sort of a mix of modern times and a mix of the era. I thought it was incredible the way that you told the story. So I mean, the only thing I compare it to, I hope you don't mind, is Hamilton, in the sense that Hamilton is historical, but it's contemporary at the same time. I believe that your film does the same way. Not a bad thing to be compared to Hamilton, though.
Yes, I'm very complimented. I did not know anything about Hamilton at the time that we wrote it and shot it, but flattered for the compliment. And yeah, absolutely. It is. I mean, I guess you can take different things out from it as you will, but it was meant to sort of be seen through this eyes of this schoolboy. And I actually first came to Ovid in high school and sort of diverse classroom, and we found him very relatable as a character. So Jamal, who's the boy, is sort of a little bit of an embodiment of, you know, the collective group of us that was learning Latin. And then he's sort of a vehicle for the way into Ovid's world. So in a certain ways, this movie is a fantasy. And I think a lot of what it is looking to do is sort of, I think there's a lot of very, very relevant things that we can get from the classical world and see it through a modern lens. So by seeing it through his head, we're sort of getting the classical world, but as we would know it, because we don't really know, you know, an average person doesn't know exactly what Rome was like. So, you know, you can sort of have a sense of what togas are like, but you're probably bringing in modern elements too. And so that's where we get to the fun world of togas and sneakers. And from there, it gives us you know, a whole very fun and, as you mentioned, unique world to play in, and one which we can comment on the old world and our current world, and have a lot of fun in it.
Well, I mean, oddly, if you heard a description of the film, you'd think, well, maybe this doesn't quite work. It works so well. The characters are so well rounded. The production design is sort of a mix of you've got people in togas, but they're wearing Converse shoes, right? I mean, I love that aspect. What led to those production choices? Was it necessity, or was it because I do feel that, like with independent films, that sometimes the thing that is, oh, we don't have the money, actually makes it much cooler. And I felt that was completely achieved with your movie.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that so I come from a theatrical background, and there's been some very interesting interpretations through theater of modernizing sort of older texts, and I find them very, very compelling, where you're sort of watching them and you know that this text was written at least 100 years ago, if not more, but you think, oh my goodness, this is our world, this is today. So I was looking for sort of a way to do that with this classical world, and so throughout the whole process, in writing it and then in working with our incredible creative team and the art department and the costume department, we were always looking for what is that like balance between the ancient world and the modern world. And so that definitely was on purpose. Sort of that costumes, for instance, come from the idea of a toga party, because where do we still wear togas? A toga party. So there's the togas and the sneakers. You'll notice that most characters always have some sort of modern footwear. And then there's, multiple other examples. We're in some great ruins of Detroit neoclassical architecture with columns. Even Detroit. I mean, there were many reasons to set the film in Detroit, but it is sort of, America's bygone industrial empire, so that sort of stands in for the Roman Empire. So that's another place of intersection, sort of this American city where great artistic life has grown up amongst the ruins. So, I mean, yes, like if I had sat down and said, like, I want to do a really, really accurate historical drama, I'm sure would not have had the funds to do it, but in the conceit, it was never actually meant to be that way. And therefore we were able to have this sort of fun, unique world built in, and it allowed us to make the movie. And I think if we had done it in a more straight-laced way, we would not have been able to get into sort of all the fun and all the commentary on our current society.
Well, it works so well because you forget for a while, although there are reminders throughout the movie. This is through a young boy reading the book. And so he's living his life reading the book in various places. And so maybe that's how he would imagine it. And also Detroit, I'm originally from Detroit. So there is sort of an industrial, like dilapidated parts of Detroit that are stunningly beautiful. And I feel like you really captured that. You used that environment in a really positive way. So bravo for that. I thought it was just very original. I also think this kind of opens it up for filmmakers to say, hey, you don't have to do a historical drama traditional way that one would think. So just fantastic. The other thing is your cast. I'm not familiar with most of the lead actors, but I am. John Savage is one of my favorite actors from The Deer Hunter and a little known movie called Inside Moves, directed by Richard Donner. Also Hair. He was the lead in Hair with Treat Williams. What was it like working with John, and how did you collect these amazing other actors and tell them, hey, we're doing this thing. It's set in Roman times, but you're going to be in sort of a contemporary setting. How did you get them to go along on that journey? So that's like 3 questions. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll see if I'll break it down. We were so incredibly lucky to get the cast that we got. John Savage clearly is a legend, and he's such an artist. We got the cast through the script. People responded to the script. John, I know, really loved the contemporary parallels and sort of the political commentary of the movie, and he really got it. And it's really amazing working with John because he goes so deep into his character, and even though his character is a bad guy, I think to label it boldly, he comes up with these layers of humanity. So even though he's playing this like pretty brutal dictator authoritarian, he gets so deep into the sort of personal struggles of the the sacrifices that you have to make to rule and keep control of this large, unwieldy empire during times of unrest, and the how it affects him and it tears at his heart. And he did these like amazing improvisations, I know, with various other characters and actors like Tamara Feldman, who plays his granddaughter, to get to that those amazing emotional truths. So it was really incredible working with John. And then, of course, we got to work with Corbin Bleu, who's from a very, made his name in a very different part of cinema, but is equally fantastic, very charming, manages to take the character of Ovid from the sort of young, happy-go-lucky character to one who has more of the weight of the world on his shoulder, and really bridges that transition in a great way while keeping his sort of Ovid's, charming, funny persona. And then we also had, fantastic female actresses. Tara Summers is so poignant as Julia One, who I guess I shouldn't spoil anything, but she has a challenging life, as she did in History, and Tara really brings out the sort of fiery person who is not able to live her life the way she wants to. And I think that's a very powerful character. And Tamara Feldman, who plays sort of the activist granddaughter who's at odds with her grandfather. She does really a lovely job. I know she too really got into sort of the more like political contemporary aspects. I remember the first time I got on the phone with her, she was like, I love the the commentary on our society. And I thought, she'll be great. And she was. So we were really lucky that the cast responded so well to the script and they got it. And I think there was a lot of fun in making a different kind of film. And another thing that we did in this film was we really embraced Detroit. So, this movie's somewhat about Rome, and it's somewhat about Detroit. And we really worked with a lot of community groups and amazing artists and poets and musicians in Detroit that really, and it's such a vibrant art scene, and really helped give us the exciting sort of visual, poetic, musical landscape that makes the film so unique and brings it to life. And it's, I think that was all really fun for the cast too. And then a lot of the actors were from Detroit as well. And so it was sort of a great meshing of all this stuff off camera as well as on.
Well, I'm also really impressed with, this is thousands of year old story, right? And it felt so much about today. What is it about that our struggles with love and relationships, they just resonate? The same problems that people had in the Roman era, we continue to struggle with today, which is love, fidelity, types of relationships, commitment. You really captured that in the story surrounding the poems and the story of Ovid. Could you comment on that? Because that I found really compelling, and you brought that up when you talked about John Savage.
Yeah, so I think that's something that drew me to even writing this movie to begin with, is how contemporary Ovid's poetry feels to me and felt to a lot of the people that I studied Ovid with, who were young at the time. We were all young at the time. Because he does have this sort of appeal to both sort of the adolescent and then, older people looking sort of back at relationships in their lives and everybody in between. He really grows through his poetry too. So you see sort of different phases of love. And I think a lot of what this movie asks is, what is love? And there's different layers just as there are today. So, without trying to give away too much, he has this sort of first love, which is very much sort of lust and based on looks. And then as we grow through the piece, it's sort of love of cities and love of friendship and, sort of a deeper intellectual love that he finds later on in a different character who I won't say who that is. So I think one of the reasons that his poetry has been so sought after for 2,000 years is because there are these sort of base elements to humanity that ring through history and time.
I completely agree. I found it like, at times, especially in the style that you tell the story, it just felt like so now reading poetry at a coffee shop or and just exploring those ideas. And you rarely see today in films adult conversations about love and relationships. I think the last one I can recall is Marriage Story, right, with Adam Driver. I feel like we get caught up in sort of movie tropes, right? And this movie does not do that. And that's why I think it's so compelling and why I strongly recommend that people see it, not just for the style, but the ideas that are being discussed. It's a jumping off point for a conversation. I shudder to think what poetry Ovid may have written if he had Tinder or dating apps. I mean it, but I don't think it would be much different. The commentary wouldn't be much different. I mean, that's just sort of a different, I guess it's just the dating apps just create a new complication or another way to connect. Just as with, I believe all technology, in my opinion, has just been a double-edged sword. We gain something, we lose something in all of it. So what made you want to this is not a traditional type of independent film that I see that I get to see. It's just wholly so original, and that's what really impresses me. So what made you want to tell the story and then tell it in the way that you told it? I mean, all of that is like, you could have just made a movie about, people going on the road to Vegas, or a road movie, which is an indie film trope. But you really chose something much more challenging. And I'm curious what led to that decision.
Yeah, I guess, so as we've discussed, there are sort of, I feel like, basic fundamental things, love being one of them. His coming of age, I think, is very relatable. It is in a strange way, a coming of age story. It's him arguing with his parents, and this is all true about Ovid, striking out on his own, what it's like to be in a big city away from home for the first time, making friends, making mistakes, getting successful, the mistakes of that. That's, and then of course, first love and second love, etc. In terms of the way we told it, I guess I've always been very influenced by visual art. I really love visual art. I love expressionism, and the idea that, you can sometimes get at a greater truth by not being so naturalistic. In terms of film history, that comes from, the German expressionists. I've also, I think, very influenced by Italian cinema, Fellini, also the more sort of naturalistic Italian cinema of the 1950s, neorealism, where you sort of see sort of everyday people, which sort of binds in, because on the one hand you have these, leaders, and then on the other hand it is about sort of the everyday people of Rome/Detroit. So all these influences led to this great concoction, and I guess there are people who do sort of certain independent movie tropes really well, and it certainly probably would have been a lot easier if we had I had just done a movie about, four friends sitting, in a room discussing their love lives or something like that. But to me, I felt like I could get at a greater truth and really get at, things that aren't often mentioned necessarily discussed in film in a better way that was, I suppose, truer to my voice and the voices of my collaborators on this film.
I have to say the movie is remarkable. It's I guess by the time you listen to this or watch this on the Film Threat YouTube channel, it will be out on video on demand. Is that, am I right? Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was released yesterday, so you can see it on essentially all major streaming platforms. That's Amazon, iTunes, YouTube, you name it, Google Play, Microsoft Play, and then I think most major cable companies should have it as video on demand as well. So it's easy to get a hold of.
Well, I'm happy. I'm happy to hear that. But I also want to just encourage anyone listening or watching to check this film out. It's Ovid and the Art of Love. Beautiful, remarkable, original, and I can't wait to see Esme what you have happening next. Actually, since I have you here, what are you working on next?
I have a couple of pilots in the work, and then another sort of slightly historical, but I think very relevant to today's world, historical script as well.
Well, that's good to hear. I like I say, I see so many indie films, and after a while, some of them you just see the same kinds of things. Never seen anything like this. So I encourage everybody to check it out. Thank you so much for being on the Film Threat podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. I really appreciate all your words about the film.